Let's welcome veteran DynamicsCon superhero and Microsoft MVP, Mary Myers. Today, she will be presenting her session, Power Pages for Business Central Case Study. Please stick around after Mary's session for a live Q&A.
Hello, everyone. I figured there's only one way to appropriately start this session off, and that's going to be with a good old DynamicsCon virtual OOTD. So my shirt here, it's from the second live DynamicsCon that was in Scottsdale. My cape here, this is a custom cape made by myself. And then my little tutu skirt, this is from Amazon, but you guys, I need to finish this outfit real quick and I need your help. Do I go, right, with my traditional crown, my little princess crown? This is actually from Denmark, officially from Denmark. Or do we go with my new hat that I recently got in San Antonio? Yep, I think this is it. So now that we have this settled, let's go ahead and get things started here. Let's see. Ta-da-ta-da, the big transition. This is my demo. Can I get to my slides? I'm assuming we're good. Cool. All right. So my name is Mary Myers, and we are going to talk about Power Pages for Business Central, and we're going to take a look at a case study here today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Mary Myers. I am the Chief Maximizer here at World Max, where we specialize in creating Power Platform solutions for Business Central, which is why I'm super excited to be able to share this session with you. I have been in the community. I used to say I just got here, but time flies when you're having fun. And I have been part of the community since 2018. And I am also a Microsoft MVP. And the thing that I'm probably most excited about today, though, is to share the fact, my slide messed up, but I was one of the first presenters or in the very first DynamicsCon virtual, and so this conference holds a super special place in my heart. And then also, if you want to connect with me, I would love for you to follow me on LinkedIn. I do put content on TikTok as well, just like Shirley, and YouTube and LinkedIn. So please feel free to follow me, and I'd love to connect with you guys there. All right. We have so much to cover today, but we're going to just run through things, and we're excited that this is a taped session that you guys can see in just a month. So first things first here is we're going to talk about a quick intro to Power Pages. Then we're going to talk about how Dataverse and Business Central play into Power Pages. Then I'm going to talk to you about the case study that I did, and honestly, just kind of some of the lessons learned with that, or just whenever we're creating Power Pages in general. And that's going to include solution architecture, environment management, and how to add up a custom domain. All right. So first things is let's just set the stage a little bit here, right? And that's going to say, what is Power Pages? And we're just going to keep this pretty basic, right? And so feel free to, boss lady, I have how we like this. So feel free to throw some questions or answers in the chat. I'm going to do my best to manage between both of them. So if you have any guesses on what Power Pages is, feel free to throw them in the chat there. You see we have a little bit of a lag, so that's probably not going to work awesome for me. But what a Power Page is, right, is it is just a low-code way or for you to create a website or a portal, if we want to be technical, that allows usually our external users to access business data, right? And that's all it is. It's a website that allows our users to be able to access data, but in a nice, secure manner, right? We don't want our customers to go and be able to access everything. Maybe we just want them to look at their stuff. And that's what, this component of the Power Platform allows us to do. So like I said, this is real high level, so we're not going to touch everything, but I am going to kind of talk about some things that I think are important. And one of those things is that there are two types of Power Pages, right? And this is important because this goes into our fun thing called licensing. And everyone loves to talk about licensing and feels really informed on all of those components. So that's why I wanted to kind of bring this up first. So the first type of Power Pages that we're going to have, that's going to be an anonymous user. So that's someone that can essentially log into your website without any credentials. Usually, I think this is best for just kind of like taking information in, but maybe not where you want somebody to actually access the information. I've done some things where I held a community golf scramble, and we used Power Pages as like a landing page, as a registration page, which made that super easy. And what's nice about this is that, as you can see, is it is nice and cost effective. So that anonymous user, that's going to run you $75 a month for up to 500 users that access your site. So that's what an anonymous user is. The other type of user that we see, needed to be happening more with Business Central, right, is going to be our authenticated users. And those are the people that have to have actual credentials to log in. And then we filtered those, the records that they can see to the credentials that they've shared. So that is what an authenticated user is. And that license is going to cost you $200 a month for 100 authenticated access points. And if you're wondering what happens if I go over on either one of those, don't worry. They're not going to shut off your Power Pages. They're just going to bump you up another tier and have you pay for like another pack, right? You would pay another $200 pack, right? So that you would have maybe like 200 users per month. So that is how our Power Pages licenses tier up together. I see Tiffany missed the OOTD. Don't worry, Tiff. You can catch that video next month. All right. And then briefly, I also wanted to go over the history of Power Pages. And really, the only reason I want to cover this is because it makes sense for other things. Once upon a time, it started off in ADX Studio, back in 2016. And BPP, that is before Power Pages, right? And APP is after Power Pages. So if you're wondering what that timeline up there is for, you can kind of see that it's actually transitioned. Because when I started in Power Platform back in 2018, we did have concepts of Power Pages, but they were actually tucked up under a Power App. Give me a little thumbs up in my chat, right? If you remember when Power Pages, when we created those from the Power App section, because actually all Power Pages is, they're well, that's not all there. I mean, they're a lot more than that, but really they get their heart. They're model-driven Power App at the end of the day, right? And that is really important because that affects the structure and the way that our data gets in there. Now, back in 2022, right, this is when we became branded to Power Pages. So this is when we became after Power Pages, right? And then last year in 2023, for our Business Central lovers, we finally got the ability to have virtual tables. So we could finally see the vision of being able to bring our Business Central data over into Power Pages. So the reason that is so important, right, is because Power Pages runs off of Dataverse. You can't put any other data source into Power Pages. What you have to do, right, is you have to get whatever data it is that you want to Dataverse, and then we can use that data once it's inside Dataverse to expose that in our Power Pages. So that's why it was so exciting for us to have these virtual tables that came out last year in 2023. Special round of applause for our team over there at Microsoft for helping make that happen. All right. So now that we have a brief understanding of what our Power Pages are, right, they're they're a nice way for us to be able to have our customer data externally facing. So usually whenever we give sessions, a lot of times we're like, I don't want to hear about the things that could be. We want real things, right? Like, what have you actually done? I want to know the nitty gritty. And that's why we're talking about a case study here today. The case study that I did, we created a customer portal, right? Which is kind of what I've been alluding to and part of, there's a foreshadowing is what my son would say here. But what we did is we created a customer portal for a Business Central partner. This Business Central partner, they create special apps for other partners and end users of Business Central. Now, they have over 30 different products and over, 100 different customers, and they needed a way to make this process more automated. Let me show you. We will take a look at their very manual process here. So again, before Power Pages, right? Over here, I don't know if I have. Nope, I don't. Okay, so on the left-hand side, we will see a customer. And what would happen is the customer would send an email to the partner here, right? Which happens to be ERP Connect Consulting. And so they would send an email over to them, and they would either need a new key, right? Like they want to have more applications, or they have a new user, something to that extent. Or they also have questions of when is my license going to expire? How many customers do I have, using this particular application at this site, right? So their customers would have a lot of questions, and they would then send those through email. And then, the sales team would go ahead and look up the information in Business Central, and then have that sent over, right? And be able to send them their information or send them that key request through email and back up to them, right? But just kind of a lot of back and forth. They had a hard time keeping up with that, especially as they're trying to scale their business, which is what we all want. This is the perfect problem to, in fact, have. So what they said is, hey, Mary, we're already using Business Central. We really want to have a customer portal, right? So that we can provide better customer service and that they can, essentially self-serve. We are in an instantaneous world, and we want answers yesterday, not 5 days from now, whenever you're able to dig out of your emails. So what we did is created this Power Page for them. And now what this did, right, to revamp their process, as you can see, again, starting over here on the left-hand side, we have our customer, and the customer, then they put their request in, or they go in and they sign into Power Pages, right? And from Power Pages, they are actually able to see their specific information. They can put in a request for a new module or a new key. They can also take a look at all of the keys that they've already purchased, right? So it's really taking away from that back and forth that they were having to do before, when the customer can just self-serve and get that information immediately, and then Business Central just sends that off. So this allows, the sales team to do what? Make more sales, and just service their customers better in other ways, and continue to create more amazing apps. So this was a really great case study because, one, it helped the customer, but also I will say that we learned a lot in this one. I've done probably a handful of Business Central Power Pages now over the last maybe 6 months to a year. And so there's some things that we got to talk about, right? It's not all pretty and fancy is what I'm kind of getting at here. And I'd be curious to know, again, leave it in the chat, what you think the number one mistake is whenever we are creating Power Pages for Business Central. Be curious to know what anyone thinks there, right? But I'll go ahead and tell you what it is. There's a, mood killer here. It's that Power Pages, right? Creating these websites, it's a lot more than a pretty screen with some dashboards. It's a lot more than saying, okay, I want my dashboard here and my widgets, and when they sign on, and I want the colors to be like this. A lot of times what happens is we get really stuck on visually the way that we want this Power Page to look. And that's really one of the biggest things I have found in creating Power Pages, and why I wanted to share this session with everyone. So first things first, right? We've already talked about the fact that we have to get our Business Central data into Dataverse. And this is the first thing, right? Like before we can even think about creating a design, we need to understand how are we going to get that to happen. Because as we said, Power Pages only takes Dataverse. So we have to get our Business Central to Dataverse so we can then take it to Power Pages. But did you know that there are 4 different ways to get your Business Central data to Dataverse? And that's exactly where I'm like, there's more than just pretty pictures, because, maybe you're like, hey, Mary, that's great. Which way do I choose? I don't know. That really depends on your business case and what it is, different data parts that you're trying to bring in and what your entire process is. And honestly, you'll probably have a combination of these different approaches as well. The first one is going to be, the synchronization that's built in for Dataverse and Business Central. So that's going to be where you go and you download that virtual table app and you put your Dataverse connection in there, and then you set up those different syncs, and we have our coupling records, right? So that's one way to get our Business Central data to Dataverse, and that's just fine. We also have our Business Central virtual tables, right, which we just alluded to. And what that does, right, that doesn't actually bring, the table lives in Business Central and then Dataverse calls it. But the good thing about our virtual tables is that you do have full CRUD actions, and it is real-time data where you don't necessarily have real-time data with that Dataverse sync. So different things to think about whenever you're architecting your design. You can also use simple triggers inside of Power Automate, like whenever a record is created or deleted or modified, right? Basically, we can use Power Automate to get our data from Business Central to Dataverse by creating Dataverse tables and just writing it right like that way. And then also with that, we can also use business events, right? So when a new customer is added or there's some specific events in Business Central, that again, will trigger that and be able to bring our data over to Dataverse. So there's some things to think about, right? Before you're starting to get going in there, you need to say, hey, what data is it that I need to have get to Dataverse first from Business Central? And what is the best approach for me to take in that? From there, we really need to take a look at our solution architecture. And there's so many different components that go into the solution architecture for Power Pages. So the first thing, right, that I said that we're going to do is we're going to need to talk about our data modeling. And I'm going to make sure that the slides that we get to y'all, I see a lot of my slides are cut off here, and I don't know if you guys see that or if it's just my screen here, but see some stuff cut off, but I'll make sure you guys have some proper slides. But one of the things, right, when we're looking at our data modeling is first and foremost, as we were just talking about, we need to understand what approaches are we taking to get our Business Central data into Dataverse. And then what we also have to do is identify, do we need any custom APIs, right? Just because we have some data in Business Central, it doesn't mean that that's readily available. So if it's not part of your standard V2 APIs, you're going to need a custom API, right? Or are you going to create a web service, right? And maybe create a data flow that's going to take that right to Dataverse. So there's a couple different things that you need to think about as far as that data modeling structure first. What is it that I am taking over there? The next thing that we need to think about is data security, right? Especially when it comes to Business Central, in my opinion, right? Maybe I'm biased, but I think that when we're talking about customer data, it's super important to say, who can actually access that information. And that's why we have to decide, are you going to have anonymous or are you going to have authenticated, right? Who can actually access that? And again, that ties back to your license types. So all of that needs to happen before you decide, what color your Power Pages are going to be. You also want to take a look at what tables your users can actually view, right? Do you want, just because somebody has access to Power Pages, are they going to be able to see your geo history and your bank account information? Or do you just want them to be able to see, like in our case, we just wanted them to be able to see a very specific table. And so we had to create a custom API, and we took that custom API into Dataverse, and we had it so that the customers could only see that one table within inside of this partner's system. And then again, just like any other data that we have to work with, we have to identify, is this going to be read access? Or are we going to allow some of this to be edited as well, right? So that's a super important thing. And this is really, I think where the crux of things get down to it when we come to Business Central and exposing that external data. I made a joke yesterday to someone about what could go wrong with me having access to all of the data in their system and being able to export it. And this person just went like white in the face. And that's, kind of resembles this conversation here. So it's super important that we're thinking about like data security and protection. We also need to talk about site security. And from that, right, it's the same thing as the other page. I see we've got a data security and our site security are really going to be the same thing, right? What it comes down to, our site security is going to say who can access our site, and our data security is going to see who can actually see that data and who can work with that data in between the system. So that's what we've got going on there. And then here's another part that really throws people off, right? It's not just saying, okay, we have our data model structures, we've identified what type of site that we're going to have, who can access it, what data we're going to have in there. And then finally, what we also need to take a look at in that is that we need to have an invitation process. So let's say that we've decided that we're going to have an authenticated approach. And how are people going to log into your site for the first time, right? You need to set that up. There's a whole invitation process that goes in with setting that up. And so what that means is, are you going to send, an invitation to a user one by one? Are you going to send it to an entire group, right? Like, how are you going to get people access to your authenticated website, right? Like, these are plans that have to all come into play before you even get started. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to access it. And then you need to think, okay, because it's not just intuitive, right? Like these emails, honestly, we recommend that you create flows to set up this invitation process. And there's special fields on tables once you get started with Power Pages, like on the contact table. Basically, whenever you set up a sandbox for Power Pages, it's going to modify your contact table inside of Dataverse. And inside of there, it's then going to say invitation sent. You're going to have some additional fields on your contact and your account tables. And so what you're going to want to do really is set up a flow, because otherwise you're going to have this very manual process. When somebody is set up with a contact, then that could give them like an invitation code. But you have to identify, how are we going to get this customer that invitation flow? You can send it manually, right? Or the better thing would be to do, like I said, is create an automated flow so that every time this specific checkbox, right, is selected on that Dataverse table, that then it sends out an invitation to create their code for them. So again, these are just things that you really have to go through and think about ahead of time. And then additionally, what you're going to have to do is, like, whenever they send a redemption code, you're still going to need to authenticate them. And we're going to get into that in just a second. But again, one thing that I want to really stress about is that when you're having this invitation process and this authentication process, it's really important that we create a sorry, I was just reading the instructions from when Liz was saying that we've got some slides where the words are cut off. I was noticing that too. So if you scan, and I'll kind of go back to it at the end of this whenever we're in the live questions, but we'll circle back on that as far as how we get you guys a nice clean presentation here. But anyways, we want to have user guides is really what I'm getting at, right? For this invitation, for your portal, you're going to need to be able to have that for whomever it is that you want to access your site. It's going to need to be a little bit more intuitive than that. And then also what we did for our invitation process, so you have our Power Pages, but then we also created a model-driven app that allowed our users, or like in our case study here, that allowed the salespeople of the client, of the team that we were working with, they had a model-driven app where they could go in there and manage the authentication process between new users into that site. So we definitely recommend that in addition to your website, right, that you also have a model-driven app that allows you to see who has access to this site and where are they at in their redemption process. So like I said, after, right, you've even just accepted they've sent that redemption code, you still have to decide, right, how are you going to prove that these people are real people? And so you're going to have to identify, these are, identity providers, and basically Power Pages is really great because it allows you to use, obviously, some standard ones that we already have set up, or, you can also do the Azure Active Directory. The Azure Active Directory B2C is Microsoft's preferred way for you to set up that identity provider, though. So just tips there, but obviously you do have other options as well. All right. So the next thing that we're going to talk about here is going to be environment management, right? And again, these are things that we don't think about until afterwards. Again, these are some lessons learned that we have recently encountered. And so whenever, the thing that we always like to do, right, we're trying different things. And so you don't actually want to create a Power Page in a sandbox environment or a developer environment, because they don't have any Dataverse capacity. And it will make it more challenging for you to take that sandbox Power Pages into a full production environment, right? It doesn't mean that you can't, right? But it will take some more work to get that going. So it's best to always either start off in that should say trial environment for there. But basically what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're creating your Power Pages, even if it's a sandbox one, in a Power Platform environment that has capacity, right? Or Dataverse capacity, because your development or trial ones, they do not have that Dataverse capacity. So it makes it a little bit more challenging for you to move them into into production. And again, what's really recommended is that you can create your Power Platform environment, you create your Power Pages in there. And then I recommend using pipelines, right, to take those solutions to the proper environment that you need to use. But the other thing that you have to do whenever you're using Power Platform environments and Business Central environments in this case is going to be that you have to map your Business Central environments to your Power Platform environments. Let's go ahead and take a look at the next page. As you can see here, right, this is showing you from my, on the top left-hand side of this screen here on this corner, you can see that it says that I'm in my Dynamics 365 Business Central Admin Center, right? And so from my Admin Center, I'm just looking at my different environments. And down at the bottom, you can see where I have this red box. They've not recently, maybe 6 months to a year ago now at this point, right? They have this option for us to be able to link our Power Platform environment. And this is really important because this is where your data is going to pull. This is how you're going to make sure that you get your sandbox data into your Business Central sandbox data into your sandbox Power Platform environment and production to production, right? So this gives us really good ALM, which is important to know in here. The thing is, right, is so that you can actually do this from the admin center here, but small tip that I'll throw out there as well. If you need to overwrite, this is going to be considered your default settings. And if you need to overwrite your default settings, you can go ahead and go to the assisted setup with inside Business Central and search up Power Platform in there, and it'll allow you to map to any setting. Because when you're in here, it will only allow you from this assisted setup, from this admin setup, it will only allow you to pick a Power Platform environment that's respective to your Business Central environment. So if you create a Power Platform environment that's a sandbox or production, you can map that to your sandbox and production environments here, but you won't be able to look at your default environment or if you have like a trial or developer environment, right? Again, you need that Dataverse capacity. So if it's not available, you can, like I said, override it in another area. All right, so the custom domain, right? What is a custom domain? Whenever you're starting up and you're creating your Power Pages, you can create, whatever URL you want, but it is going to have a handle on the backside that says like powerpagesportals.com, right? So I think for my golf scramble one, we called it like communitygolfscramble.powerpagesportals.com or something, right? And that was just fine for that particular situation. However, most times, right, in a customer situation, they don't want to necessarily have that additional URL. They want to have a custom domain, right, so that they have a URL picking specifically to where you want it. Now, I feel like I'm pretty old. I kind of hesitate that. But yeah, I guess the reality of it is I'm a lot older than I think that I am. And I've been around with GoDaddy. Like GoDaddy has been like the original get your website here for a hot minute, right? And so now the colors and stuff have changed a lot of times. But I don't think I'm alone in this, right? I think that typically speaking, a lot of times that when somebody wants to say, hey, I'm going to go get a new website, right? I want a custom domain, that they're going to go over here and they're going to go to GoDaddy. What's so cute about this is that GoDaddy, right? Creating a custom domain, like if you buy your domain from GoDaddy, it is the hardest one, right? To switch to in Power Pages, in my personal opinion and experience. And so here, right? This is why I say that I've been battling GoDaddy on these custom domains. And the first time, man, it whooped us. It did. I would say that GoDaddy won. And we just had a lot of issues with the SSL certificate. We didn't understand what was going on there and had to do a lot of troubleshooting. But, troubleshooting is great because it allows us opportunities for improvement. So then a couple of weeks ago, I had somebody call me and they're like, hey, we are taking this Power Page live. Do you think that you can, help us get it over the line? Absolutely. We got you covered. And then I was like, do we happen to have a custom domain? They said, yeah, we do. I said, great. Is it GoDaddy? They said, yep, it's GoDaddy. And I was like, all right, well, at least I've got my documents in hand for this. So I feel like I actually conquered GoDaddy the second time. And other than me just being excited because I won, I really want to tell you guys how you can win and why I think that, this is the tricky parts in it. So whenever we create a custom domain, right, inside of Power Pages, it's super easy for you to enter that custom domain. But what you need to do then is you need to then upload your SSL certificate, right? And so you get that SSL certificate essentially from GoDaddy whenever you're buying that. But fun facts is that GoDaddy does not provide it in a format of an PFX file, which, wouldn't you know, that's what Power Pages requires you to have it in a PFXL file. So you have to go through this fun translation process, right? And so they have that app right there inside of like GoDaddy. And this is the code, right? This OpenCSL export out certificate. This is the one that you want to use in order to, because there's a couple different essentially like commands that you can use for that translation. And some of them work and some of them don't. And this has been trial and error. So I really want to call this out for you. If anyone's doing this and they need to translate that, this is the code that you want, right? Because really what you're having to do is take the PKS and transfer it. And so you're going to use the cert file, right? Because when you do this translation, it's going to give you a zip file. You're going to have 3 different types. And you're going to want to take the SSL converter of the .cert file and transfer that to the PFX. But also, whenever you're doing this, it's going to give you a password, and you need to save that password because you're going to have to put that password in Power Pages afterwards. So that's really the trick. Adding a custom domain really isn't challenging. The hardest part about it is that your SSL certificate is going to need to be in a PFX file. And if you happen to go through GoDaddy, it does not give it to you in that. So here in the middle of my screen is the information that you need to be able to do that. All right. Tried to go through things pretty high level and pretty quickly, just because I was a little bit worried on time and I wanted to give you guys, some time to ask some questions here at the end. But let's go ahead and wrap up, right? Let's summarize what we've been talking about because we've got a lot of information that I've shared with you. First, what we've talked about is Power Pages, right? All Power Pages is it's a nice website that allows you to access your business data in a nice, safe, controlled environment and settings. With Power Pages, we have 2 different types. You can either have an anonymous Power Page, right? And that means you don't have to have a username and login, right? It's kind of like free bar. Anyone can get in and, put information in there. I don't recommend that though, right? For every situation. I think that an anonymous Power Pages is really great at taking information, but maybe not sharing information, right? And then we also have a authenticated Power Page. And that's where we have to have our username and credentials, right? Think of that as like our VIP access. And from there, we also talked about the customer case that I did, right? And this is a super common one, and that's a customer portal. And that's just being able to have our customers be able to self-serve, right? And so in this scenario, customers no longer had to bog down the sales and operation team with emails about when did this expire, just some different information. And they were also able to improve the efficiency in their sales process, right? Sales can happen automatically. Those requests can happen automatically because they're sending them through Power Pages, which is automatically logging that into their Business Central system instead of just having that stuck in their email for a few emails back and forth. So there was definitely a big win there. And then I think really the most important thing that I want everyone to take away from, and that I hope that you've taken away from this, is that there's so much more. Like, we did not once talk about themes or pictures or templates or anything like that, right? There's a lot of great sessions, whether they are on YouTube or, blogs, and on the DynamicsCon YouTube channel, there's already a lot of great stuff, on how to make websites really pretty and like the liquid languages that you can use to break outside of the templates. But what is at the core of it, right? If a Power Page at the end of it is like for our data, right? Then we really need to make sure that we're focused on structuring that data. And what does that data look like? And what is the security for that data? I was at a conference, I don't remember where it was recently. I was at a conference and, someone in the keynote was like, what do you think? And they've, talked about, we've had like 3 different keynotes at this point, and everything's Copilot. So see, now I've got my Copilot conversations in here, so I'm covered. But so this keynote was talking about Copilot as well. And then I said, what do you think Microsoft's number one concern for Business Central data for Business Central is? Like, what do you think our top priority going into this new fiscal year is? And so I'm like, Copilot, AI. And they're like, no, that's not it. It's security. So I think, right, that goes along and in with this as well, right? Security is going to be one of the most important components, in my opinion, when we're setting up our Power Pages. You have to make sure that you have this super tied up and super protected, because otherwise you'll run the risk of having, people that you don't want get into your system have access to your, super secret data. And you're also going to have that white face of the guy that, is concerned that all of his data is leaking out, right? That's a very common concern. So when we're thinking about Power Pages, identifying all of the different security risks and tables that we're going to have in there is so super important. We also talked about how important it is to get our Business Central data into Dataverse. No Dataverse, no play, right? That's really what it comes down to. And then that's going to be, a whole conversation and discovery in that to say, what parts are we, or how are we going to get our Dataverse, our Business Central data into Dataverse, and which approach are we going to use? I think that, again, that really determines on what that customer's use case is. So there's a huge discovery process that goes into what we're going to do for Power Pages, again, far before we're ever making pretty pictures of anything from there. Then we're also going to talk about our environment, or we talked about environment management, right? Make sure that we are building our Power Pages in a place that has capacity, Dataverse capacity, right? If you don't, you still can move your Power Pages over there. But again, just from personal experience, this was on a project that we took live a couple weeks ago. I've just kind of by habit usually create a specific environment and then create my Power Pages in there. But in this situation, honestly went back and forth for a little bit because I was like, why can't I? It kept saying I didn't have any, Dataverse capacity. And I'm looking in there and I'm like, we've got 27, licenses. We have Dataverse capacity. And so I couldn't figure out why. And the reason is because it was started off in it was just started off in a different environment, and it made it, there's a little bit more work. So make sure that we're creating Power Pages in an area that has Dataverse capacity. And then finally, so that you can start your record off with you being at 1 and GoDaddy being at 0, make sure that you just remember the little trick about for your SSL certs, use that code, that little snip that I said, use that one for your command for that translation. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. So I'll go to our live questions here. And as we're kind of throwing some questions here in the chat, like I said, I was trying to look at some of these as we were going through, and one of the biggest, questions that I did see or that Liz had thrown in there, and I had noticed when I was going through this as well, is the slides looked a little bit condensed. So if you want to, I'm going to quickly go back to this slide so that anyone that didn't get my QR code before, go ahead, scan this QR code, and then send me a message to say, please send me these slides. That's going to be an easy way for me right now to be able to get those, to get that to you. So I'll leave this up here for a second, but I'm also going to be taking questions. So, maybe the first priority should have been Dataverse. Question from Mike, would you need to be an authenticated user to enter data to your BC? No, you don't actually have to be an authenticated user to enter data to BC. And let me talk about why and kind of why there's some security risks in this, right? So from a licensing perspective, you're going to have at least I always recommend a service account, right? So that service account will be what you tie Power Pages to, and that service account has to have a full Business Central license, right? That's how we get our Business Central access to our Business Central data to there. So in theory, right, if we talk about to that site security, I could throw up there a customer table, or expose my customer table from Dataverse to Business Central. And if we're using virtual tables, that information that's live. So that's going right back to Business Central, like real time. So again, it just depends on how you're setting that up. So, you can send data to Business Central if you have you have to have the Business Central license to begin with, right? But your users don't have to have a BC license, and they don't have to be authenticated to do that. It is obviously highly recommended that in the situation that you would have an authenticated access point, right? So that kind of comes down to the design factor. Does that make sense? I guess kind of just, feel free to throw in the chat if that, kind of helped answer your question, or feel free to, connect if you want to dive in deeper to that question as well. Cool. All right. Well, if we don't have any other questions, we can go ahead and cut this a little bit early, but I will give a quick plug. So at 4:00 Eastern time, make sure that you check out the breakout room. We're going to have an awesome Women in Tech roundtable, and this is for everyone. Right? So this event is for everyone. We're going to just have some great conversations. It's going to be hosted by myself and Tasha Anspach from SA Global. And we can't wait to meet more people in the community that want to help empower to get more diversity and just empower the women in our tech and dynamics community. So thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for everyone for voting for me. This is absolutely one of my most favorite events of the entire year because the community is just awesome. I have had so much fun hanging out in the chat today, and I hope that you guys have as well. And I would say that you do have some homework. I'm going to give you some homework from DynamicsCon here. I would say find something, right? Find something that you're really, really excited about that you learned, and create a LinkedIn post about it, and then tag the presenter. And it'll be a great way for you to get more involved with the community. So with that, I'll say goodbye, and thank you so much, everyone.